Hi, I'm Kirsten.
I'm Clea.
Welcome to Café.
Today we're going to be talking about myths of dyslexia. And myths can be really harmful. They can affect our self-esteem. They can affect how we go about getting intervention, how we go about managing things. So we're going to be talking about the myths that we hear the most here at KC and just being dyslexic ourselves. So the first myth that we hear a lot is that dyslexics are dumb. People think that dyslexia is a cognitive issue, which it totally is not.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the weird things about being diagnosed with dyslexia is you have to have at least average intelligence. That's part of the diagnostic criteria. So if you have lower below average intelligence, you will not be diagnosed as dyslexic. You literally have to be smart to be dyslexic. Yeah, because one of the diagnostic criteria of dyslexia is that you have normal or above normal functioning intelligence, and then you have this disconnect when it comes to processing language and using language and reading and spelling and those kinds of things. So you have to have those two, sorry, I didn't mean to hit you.
No,
you have to have those two things happening in order to be diagnosed as being dyslexic. So right off the bat, that is empirically not true.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think another one also as well is reading or spelling backwards.
Yes, that is a good one.
I hear that all the time. Like that was
letter reversal.
Yeah, not even letter reversal. Just they think that we read backwards for some reason. Yeah. Like I was talking to one of my friends. I was like, yeah, like I'm dyslexic, and they were like, oh, so you read backwards? And I was like, no, like I don't read backwards. But that's what I think that was a weird thing. I was like, no, we don't read backwards.
That kind of ties into with a lot of people think dyslexia is the words moving on the page or the words reversing on the page. Or that's a different disorder. That's something different. It's not dyslexia. Dyslexia is difficulty processing language and decoding language. That's what dyslexia is. It has nothing to do with how you see, nothing to do with intelligence, nothing to do with reading backwards.
Yeah, nothing to do with reading backwards.
No, none of those things are dyslexia. Those are something else. We don't know what that is, but that's something else.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we know what the one is. The one is scotopic sensitivity syndrome.
Which is Erlin.
That's when
short
stuff
for
moves.
Erlin.
Yeah, short for
Erlin.
Erlin.
Yeah.
Named after Helen Erlin. But yeah, that's when stuff's moving, which is totally manageable too, but is not dyslexia. So you can have Erlin and dyslexia. You can have Erlin or dyslexia, but the two are different things. So that's that one. The other one is that dyslexics can't become good readers and spellers. A lot of the people that come here have been told by other professionals that they're just going to have to manage not being able to read and spell, which is
have accommodations.
Totally true,
right?
Yeah. And while we often need accommodations in terms of time and those kinds of things, with intervention, your brain actually begins to process language the same as a neurotypical person. So you start off as a dyslexic without intervention, having a great deal of difficulty with even in your brain, the areas that activated a neurotypical person will not activate as strongly in a dyslexic person. After intervention, those areas are functioning the same way they would in a neurotypical person. That is only in relation to language, reading, spelling, mathematics. For example, if you had the appropriate intervention, you're still going to have, as we talked about before, all the other fun parts of dyslexia, directionality issues, cool lateral thinking abilities, which is nice. But yeah, you can become a good reader and speller. We just learn a different way, right? So that's another one I think that's been really big.
Yeah, I think that's one of, I think even just talking to my students, there's always that, that piece where they're like, am I ever going to learn? Am I ever going to learn how to read and spell? And I'm like, we'll get there, right?
Yeah,
and I think there's just a lot of, encouraging, but also, too, a lot of, false promises I find sometimes too, so I feel like you always have to be careful with that too, right? Because it's always very different for each individual student, right? It's so different for each individual person. You could be dyslexic, but again, that's too moderate or too profound. That's where it could be totally different. And I think even me and you were talking about how we change sometimes the programming to kind of alter and help that student understand that concept, or, you know, even like comprehension issues. Like, that's still something that's probably you might have a hard time with, even though you're done the program. Yeah. Right? It's something like, it's like a muscle. You have to keep working at it. Yeah.
It's like, I feel like when you're dyslexic, your learning has to be very tailored to the way your brain learns. I think like the kind of like the model that you have normally is that here's the information, we're going to teach you how to learn it our way. Whereas if you have a dyslexic brain, it has to be the opposite. As a teacher, I have to learn how to teach it to you your way. Yeah. Because our brains work so differently. And each individual, of course, there's many different ways of learning as there are individual people, dyslexic or not. So we have to definitely tailor stuff. And not to say that, you know, you're gonna finish the program and you're just gonna be like, oh, I never have to think about reading and spelling. We do always have to think about it, right? It's something we always have to think about it, but it doesn't stop us from being good at it.
Right. And I think it's gonna be structured in a way where those steps become so consistent, where you're like, okay, this is what I do, that it's not that you're not doing your steps anymore, it's just you become so fast at it that other people don't really realize that you're doing it. You're just doing it so fast, it's become, right? Like it's just it's become just such a habit that that's just the way that it is. So I think that's a huge change for sure.
Yeah, and the way that people see things. So like, if you're out there and you're like, well, I'm dyslexic and I've been told that that's just something I have to deal with, it's actually, you don't. You can learn to read and spell.
Absolutely.
You can learn to read and spell.
Yeah, and also keep your good qualities as well too, right? Like I think that was one of the things too, where when I started Barton, I was like so gung ho. I was like, yes, I'm going to be learning how to read and spell. I was so happy about it. And then it was like a couple years of me just hyper focusing on all of that, where it's like I kind of lost sight of like painting and my creative side, where it's like I still needed to do art classes. I still needed to make the good things that I'm really good at and still work on it and have that the equal balance of the two.
Yeah, and that's really important, just make sure that, you know, you're not sacrificing everything for one thing, right? Like if you have extracurricular, say for example, if you love hockey, right? Yeah. Well, you're not going to cut out everything else in your life just for hockey, right? You still got to go to school, you still got to come to KC, you still got to go hockey, you still got to eat, you still got to socialize. It's creating that balance and making sure that you're prioritizing all these things that will make you a whole person. And it is hard sometimes. So you start learning, you're just so, you're like, I want to catch up and I want to do this and I'm just going to dig in. But you will be able to learn even if this is part of a whole part of your life, right? This is just one part of a whole person.
And I also believe too there was another myth that they were saying that they think more people that are male are more of a chance of being dyslexic than female, and that's actually not right. No, they're actually it's equally both female and male that are dyslexic, because dyslexia is hereditary, right? It's like that coin flip, right? So
what tends to happen is that males tend to act out, so they have more behavioral issues, so they're caught as being dyslexic. Females tend to act in, so they become more quiet, more reserved, more compliant, and then those kids never get diagnosed. So that's kind of where I think that myth comes from.
Right, because but I feel like for me, like I was always very like like you'll know when some like when some person's upset. But that's where I think you're totally right. Like the boys are like they're sad, or they act out in anger, or they get violent, or that was the same thing with me when I was in school. I was like, I externalized it. I was just like, I didn't want anybody to know that I struggled so much. But then when I'd go home, I was like a time bomb, and I would just like freak out. But that was just because I was holding it in all day,
and it's so much to hold in.
It is so much to hold in. And then it's like and then my mom's like, there's a problem, and the teachers are like, no, that's not. But they never saw my other side, right? They never knew what I was when I wasn't at school, right?
And so many of our students that we see, like, you look at what the teacher's saying, like, oh, they're a pleasure in the classroom and they love learning, they're so interactive, and then the parents are like, as soon as they get home, they can't stop crying, and that's
a lot of crying,
because it's stressful.
And I think that's where people in education, our teachers, they kind of just need to be more personal so that they can understand us a little bit better, because I find dyslexics are more emotional, feely kind of people, right? Like that's where
Definitely, yeah.
High intensity of emotions.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Yeah, and I definitely feel that. Because, yeah, we get so... I feel like because so much of our communication is physical rather than verbal a lot of the times.
Yeah.
That, yeah, definitely that's... We act out, we get tense, we get stuck of how to express that through words, right?
Yeah.
Because of all the issues we're having processing, and that just kind of leads to more and more problems. So that's another myth.
Yeah.
The other thing that, kind of talking on the flip side, is talking about the expectations of learners, specifically dyslexic learners. So sometimes a lot of people unknowingly have unrealistic expectations of dyslexic learners. Again, not in terms of what they can learn, but how long it takes and how they learn, right? So we see a lot of times frustration because we have a student who is all these people who are doing their best and very well-meaning to help them, but maybe the intervention's not appropriate and maybe the timeline's not appropriate. Being dyslexic, because of your issues with memory, it's going to take you much longer than a neurotypical person to learn those same things, and you're going to have to learn them in a different way. So using the example here of why at KC do we not let people come once a week? So overall, we like people to come twice a week for 50 minutes. And the two reasons for that are that human memory needs multiple exposures, multiple practice. Whether you're dyslexic or not, you need to have multiple exposure to the same concepts and repetitions and practice of those same concepts in order to master them. If you're coming, for example, once a week, or you have a once-a-week exposure, it's
just not enough.
No, it's just not enough. And that's whether you're neurotypical or whether you're not neurotypical. And that's just how human memory works. You know, we're introduced to a concept, we have to kind of mull that concept over, we need time in between to give our brains a chance to create all those pathways, and then we have to come back again and practice that concept.
Yeah.
And like one of the basics of teaching, right, is you introduce the concept, you practice it together, and then the student shows you. Right? So that's 3 times in general. 3 would be the ultimate.
3 would be the perfect time.
Would be wonderful, yeah. Because that's just how many exposures it's going to take. That's just across the board. The other one that I see a lot is that people believe that because dyslexic people have such a great visual memory that we will be able to memorize an entire language.
Yeah.
Right? Like, a lot of people are surprised that because our visual memory is so great, that, well, why don't you just look at the dictionary and memorize all the words in the dictionary?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like...
See, but I think also, too, is that they think because we're dyslexic, we have a photographic memory.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I find, like, those go in, like, you could be dyslexic and have a photographic memory, but you can also be dyslexic and your short-term memory
and long-term memory too, right?
Right, like that might be a big problem, right? So
because we have a lot of guess, but we're human, right? No human being is going to be, unless, you know, I shouldn't say no human being. Most human beings, barring a very, very infinitesimal few individuals, will be able to memorize every word in a language. Yeah, not a possible.
Oh no, that was like I was in grade 6 and I was like, I'm done school. I'm not going, you know, like, I can't memorize anymore, right? And it's like, I can't remember who was one of our students that said, I kind of think of, like, my memory as, like, a filing cabinet, right? And they're like, I store this part, I learn this, and I put it in, and I'm like, wow, I feel like I wish my brain was like that, but sometimes I have to go back and re-expose that information so I'll remember and put that in my long-term memory.
Which is totally normal. Like, that's how all memories function. Yeah. Like, all memories function like that. When you're dyslexic, you just have the added kind of thing of, we're going to need more exposure. We need more repetition. Because it takes longer for us to put that information from short-term into long-term memory. The other big myth, too, I find, is that once you do intervention, you'll be cured of your dyslexia. And this one is really hard too, especially I know you, when you're applying for your student loans or like your grants and stuff, they require right now, as of filming today, a diagnosis within 4 years, which can be hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was diagnosed when I was like 12, right? So, you know, for me to get that funding, I had to potentially get that diagnosis again.
And especially with, like, the diagnostic criteria for dyslexia is not having decoding abilities, not having a phonemic awareness. Well, if you've had intervention, you're going to have that, but you're still going to you're still going to have to think about when you're reading and spelling. Like I said, you'll still be a good reader and speller, but you're still going to have that extra time.
But there's still other things in life that it takes me an insignificant amount of time to get tasks done.
Or significant amount.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Like, that's the problem, is where it's like, okay, my reading and spelling isn't an issue, but for me to study and to get all of that project done, it's going to take me more time than anybody else would, right? Yeah. Like, it takes me an insignificant time to get that task accomplished. And I think that's where again, I think that expectations, even from like a parent's perspective who's not dyslexic to a child's perspective that is, it's kind of like we're trying our very best and we're trying to get that concept, but it takes, again, so much amount of time, even just like taking the bus, right? Like, you know, like directionality, right? Like, directionality is going to be something I'm going to have to work with for the rest of my life. It's like, I have to always be conscious. That's why I always wear this bracelet on my left hand. So I know I'm left, right? Like, not on this hand, right? So even my tattoos are all on my left side, too. Because I'm like, this is my left hand.
This is left. This is right.
And
this is left.
And it's still funny, too, because I'd be, this actually happened this weekend. I'm like, okay, we need to go right. And I'm pointing left. And they're like, that's left. And I'm like, you know what I mean? Yes, I'm like, you have to just read my mind, because I don't know what's my left and right.
Yeah, so it's like, even though you get intervention, even though your things are managed, you're never going to be cured. And again, I always like using the diabetes, right? Yeah. If you're a diabetic taking insulin, that's not curing you of your diabetes. You're living, and you know, you're functioning, and you're doing everything great, but you still will have to be thinking about, oh, when do I take my insulin? How am I going to eat? Like, all those kinds of things. And it's kind of the same as being dyslexic. The intervention is going to help you greatly manage everything, but you're still going to be dyslexic at the end, right? So you're never going to be cured of dyslexia. Yeah. I'm trying to think, that was kind of like the main ones.
I think those were the main ones,
Yeah. If you think of any myths that you'd like us to dispel, you know, put them in the comments below, and we'll get back to you about any of them. And as always, like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe, guys. Thank you. Bye. Okay, ready?
Ready.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Café. I'm Kersten.
I'm Clea.
Oh, wait, I think I said it backwards.
You did. Already.
Okay, try it again.
So the first really important myth that we see a lot is we hear, I said that weird.
Hi, I'm Kersten.
I'm Clea.
Welcome to Café.
Intro.